greetings. On behalf of Wednesdays for Water, an initiative of the W4W Foundation, a think tank instituted as Citizens Collective, we welcome you to the 92nd session of Wednesdays for Water on marine vertebrates of India and focusing on sharks, rays, and sea turtles and looking at the conservation opportunities and challenges. Today we have with us Dr. Jayati Chourey, Executive Director of SaciWATERs, and Ms. Trisha Gupta, Marine Conservation Scientist, Dr. G. Mahadevan, Nature, Environment and Wildlife Society's official, and a young discussant with Ms. Nitya Bankupalli, if I'm pronouncing her rightly, from Wildlife Studies. The session today is moderated by Dr. Jayati. As I mentioned, she is from South Asia Consortium for Interdisciplinary Water Resource Studies, which is SaciWATERs. She holds a PhD degree in ecosystem-based and integrated water resource management under the discipline of Forest, Ecology and Environment from IIFM Bhopal and FRI University, Dehradun. Her MSc is in Limnology, Aquatic Environmental Sciences. Water is a subject which she remains close to her heart and the core of her professional life, and which is over 16 years of work in her kitty with many publications and wonderful ones. And in her 16 years, she's focused on sustainable natural resource management with environmental consultancies, international development organizations, academic and policy research institutions, and rural community-based organizations. Our professional assignments are spread across Africa and Asia, and that's also the scope of work SaciWATERs gets into it. So without much ado, may I invite Dr. Jayati to take over the session and start the biodiversity series, which we have started at Wednesdays for Water. And thank you all of you for attending, all the participants here. We are really grateful to make these sessions meaningful for us. With all Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, we have actually crossed 150 sessions now. So we feel very grateful to all the participants and speakers, where we have 250 speakers plus, and we are going to add few more today. So over to you, Jayati, and thank you so much for organizing this session.
Thank you so much, Mansi, and the entire team of W4W Foundation for providing me this opportunity to design and host this series on water and biodiversity. So to provide our audience a brief background of this series, the idea behind designing the series was to create and develop public awareness on aquatic biodiversity and their conservation status, and also to bring the ecological perspective to the forefront, which is generally absent from mainstream anthropocentric water discourses. So this special series will take away the spotlight from Homo sapiens sapiens, the modern humans, and shift it on other species with whom we share this planet. So we started this series in February, and our first episode, in our first episode, we discussed about the freshwater indigenous fish biodiversity of India with case studies from Kashmir and Telangana. The recording of the first session is available now on YouTube. Thanks to Mansi for that. So our today's session is focused on marine ecosystems. So as per published scientific research, I would be sharing these citations or references in the chat box. Humans have impacted 87 to 90% of global ocean surface. And these negative impacts have led to severe biodiversity loss, which in fact can be compared to earlier mass extinction events on this planet. So in today's session, we would be discussing about the marine ecosystems and biodiversity, and the spotlight today is on some of the highly ecologically sensitive and important species of marine invertebrate. So we have, so our first speaker is Ms. Trisha. She is a PhD student at the University of Oxford, and she is also a marine conservation scientist. So Trisha would be talking on sharks and rays of India, insights on fisheries and conservation. So a warm welcome to this session. Trisha, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just share my screen. Thank you so much, Jayati, and the rest of the team for inviting me here to give a talk today. I am Trisha Gupta, and I'm a PhD student at the University of Oxford. So my research currently focuses on sharks and rays of India, their conservation and their sustainable fisheries. And previously to that, I've also done some work on other fisheries issues such as bycatch and other issues around marine conservation. So today I'm going to be talking a bit about my work around sharks and rays. So when we think of biodiversity, especially in India, I think the first picture that comes to most of our minds is of a forest or some sort of similar terrestrial ecosystem. And maybe we might picture an animal such as a tiger or an elephant. But what a lot of people might not think about is the marine biodiversity that we have in Indian waters. This tends to often get overlooked when we think about wildlife. But India actually does have a very rich diversity of marine life that are found in our waters. We have a number of different habitats such as coral reefs, mangroves, and seagrass systems. And we also have a number of different megafauna species like whales, turtles, and sharks, amongst others. Even when it comes to our fisheries, I think a lot of people might be surprised to know that India is actually amongst the top fishing countries in the whole world. So if we combine both fisheries and aquaculture, I think we currently rank second in the entire world in terms of production, which is of course quite a high rank. And fisheries in the country tends to be very diverse. So we can have anything from the sort of large scale mechanized fishing vessels like trawlers that you see in the picture on the left side to very simple, small scale, traditional or artisanal forms of fishing, such as the fisher with a cast net that you see on the right side. And in between these two extremes are a lot of other different types of fishing vessels and gear that are also found in Indian waters. And what might be even more surprising to know is that not only are we amongst the top fishing nations in the world overall, but we're also one of the top fishing nations specifically for sharks in the world. So I think we currently rank number 3 in terms of the number of, or in terms of the volumes of sharks and rays that are currently harvested in our waters. So just to give you a bit of context, in the 1990s, every single year, between 50 to 70,000 tons of sharks and rays were harvested by Indian fisheries, which is of course a very large number. So before we go any further into this though, let me take a step back and talk about what sharks and rays are to begin with. So sharks and rays are nothing but a group of fish. They're cartilaginous fish, which means that their internal skeleton is made up of cartilage rather than bone, which is different from your typical bony fish, such as sardines and mackerels and other fish that you might have encountered or consumed commonly. Sharks and rays are also collectively known as elasmobranchs, which is a term that I'll also be using during my talk. They're a highly rich species group with over 1,100 species of sharks and rays found all across the world. And I can't give you an exact number because new species are still being discovered every year. They're a commercially important species group. So most shark and ray species are fished and harvested by vessels all across the world. And they're used for a variety of purposes, including just for food, their meat is consumed. And finally, and quite unfortunately, they're also one of the most highly threatened species groups in the world today. So as per a recent assessment, about 1/3 of all elasmobranch species are currently facing the risk of extinction. And this is even more alarming if you consider that the previous assessment found that it was about 1/4 of all species that are under threat. So in a period of less than 10 years, a lot more species have now come under extinction or now coming under the risk of extinction. Which is of course quite alarming for these very diverse and important group of species. And by far, the single largest threat to all elasmobranchs is unfortunately fishing pressure. So as I said, these species are caught throughout the world, either intentionally or unintentionally. And this fishing pressure is the main reason that their populations have been so depleted. So coming back to the Indian context, we have at least 160 species of elasmobranchs that have been recorded in our waters. And there could potentially be a lot more, up to 200 or over 200, but these sightings need to be confirmed. But unfortunately, catches of elasmobranchs in India are declining. And I say unfortunately because it's not that fishing effort is reducing. Fishing effort is in fact increasing, but catches are reducing, which means that their populations are actually in big trouble. But we currently have very few laws and policies in place in India to conserve these species. At present, there are about 10 elasmobranch species that are currently protected under India's Wildlife Protection Act. A few more have also recently been listed, but apart from these species, it is completely legal to fish and harvest all other elasmobranchs. Now, what's important to remember is that elasmobranchs do contribute to livelihoods and subsistence. So they form important sources of income for a lot of fishers and fishing community members, and also an important food source, not just for coastal communities, but there are communities and people across the country who consume elasmobranch meat. And I'd also like to note that there are nearly 4 million active fishers in India today, with millions of more people who are involved in the supply chain, such as this female trader that you see in this picture, who sells and buys and sells these small sharks that you see over here. So elasmobranchs do contribute in some way or the other to the lives of a large number of people. And any conservation policy that's implemented might directly or indirectly affect a very large number of people. So it's very important that any kind of conservation measure or strategy that's developed needs to be in consideration of these livelihood and food security needs. So with this, I'd like to give you a bit of an example or a case study of one of the projects that I've been a part of, where we try to do exactly this, try to understand conservation solutions for threatened elasmobranchs while balancing livelihood needs of local communities. So this study was undertaken in Malvan. Malvan is a fishing town in Maharashtra on the west coast of India. And as you can see from this picture, it's a beautiful, beautiful coastal town. It has an amazing diversity of marine life. For example, you have this species, which is a wide-nosed guitarfish that is found in the Malvan waters. And I have a little video here, which plays, hopefully, just to give you an idea of what these species look like. So these are an interesting elasmobranch species. As you can see from its body structure, it looks somewhat in between a shark and a ray, and it's called a guitarfish. And as you could also see, it seems to be found in very shallow waters along the coastline of Malvan and in some other parts of India. We also have a number of sharks that are found in this region, such as the common blacktip sharks in this picture. And all of these different elasmobranch species, from the guitarfish to different stingray species and different sharks, are caught in varying quantities by the local fisheries that operate in these waters. So when it comes to the fisheries, like every other fishing center in Malvan, like every other fishing center in India, Malvan also has a wide range of different types of fishing vessels and gear that are found in this region. And I'm going to be focusing a bit on trawl fishing for this talk. So trawlers are all of the big boats that you see in the background of this picture. So this study was conducted while I was working with Dakshin Foundation, which is a research and conservation not-for-profit that's based in Bangalore. So we conducted over 2 years of landing surveys where we looked at the kind of elasmobranchs that are being captured by the fisheries in this region, particularly by trawlers. And I won't get into the results of the study too much, but I will highlight that one of the things that we found is that when it comes to the trawl fishing, it appears that these elasmobranchs were caught almost entirely as bycatch. And by bycatch, I mean that they were caught accidentally in the nets while these trawlers were fishing for their target species, such as shrimp and other fish. But because elasmobranchs do have a commercial value, even though they were caught as bycatch, they're still brought back to shore and they're sold. So then our objective of the next study was then try to understand how we can reduce or mitigate some of this bycatch in trawl fishing while still considering the livelihood needs of trawl fishermen. So we use something called the mitigation hierarchy framework for this. This study was in collaboration actually with the University of Oxford, where I'm currently doing my PhD. And I won't get into too much detail of this framework as well, but just to give you an idea, this framework basically looking at our goal of reducing bycatch of elasmobranchs in trawlers, this framework helped us understand what kind of measures and steps we can take to reduce this bycatch and what kind of impact each of these steps might actually have. So thinking about this and looking at the data that we had, we developed 4 potential measures that can help reduce bycatch of elasmobranchs in trawlers and help conserve elasmobranchs essentially. So the first measure was to close the fishing grounds where elasmobranchs were caught the most because these would be their critical habitats. So closing these during, for example, the breeding season. Another measure was to restrict the use of the bottom trawl during their breeding season, because our study found that it's in this net that a lot of juvenile elasmobranchs are captured. The third potential option was to use bycatch reduction devices, which are these special types of nets that allow the escape of elasmobranchs or any kind of megafauna that's accidentally captured in the net. And the fourth option would be that once these elasmobranchs are caught, fishers will have to release juvenile sharks and rays back into the water, especially if they were still alive. So we had these 4 potential options, and the next step was to understand and see how effective each of these options might actually be when it comes to reducing elasmobranch bycatch. So we analyzed our data from the landing surveys to understand this. But more importantly, we also conducted interviews with local community members, particularly trawl fishers, to understand what they thought of these 4 different measures, what kind of impact these measures might have on their livelihoods, and whether they would actually follow these measures if they were to be implemented. So what we found is that the first measure turned out to be the one that's going to be the most effective when it comes to actually reducing bycatch and mortality of elasmobranchs in trawl fishing boats. But unfortunately, when we spoke to fishermen about this, they were not happy with this option because they said that this closing any fishing ground seasonally would have a huge impact on their livelihoods and would just not be feasible from a socio-economic perspective. So as one trawl fisherman told us, if any fishing grounds are closed, we'll have to shut down our boats and go hungry. So it would just have a very big impact on them. On the other hand, the last option, which was releasing juvenile sharks and rays, was found to be the most feasible from a socio-economic perspective. So this is because fishers said that this would have a very minimal impact on their livelihoods. It was easy for them to release these species back into the water if they were caught. And it's something that they would be willing to follow this measure if it was to be implemented. So even though this measure, releasing of juvenile sharks and rays, would not be the most effective when it comes to reducing mortality of elasmobranchs in trawl fisheries, but it would have the chance of being the most feasible to actually implement. And this is important to think about because when it comes to wildlife conservation in India, whether it's in a terrestrial ecosystem or a marine or freshwater ecosystem, what tends to happen is that we create these protected areas, like a marine protected area, and essentially remove or exclude the local community from these spaces, which can have a huge impact on their livelihoods and cause a lot of conflict. So instead, we really need to work alongside the local community, which in this case is, of course, the fishing community, and develop solutions along with them that might have a very low impact on their livelihoods or that might actually benefit them so that conservation and development go hand in hand. So in this particular case study of Malvan, as I said, we found that onboard live release would be the most feasible option to reduce bycatch of elasmobranchs and trawl fishing vessels. And this is an option that would actually be quite effective for certain elasmobranch species and something that can be implemented over the long term, again, by working alongside the fishing community. And it's important that studies such as this are scaled up where we use these interdisciplinary approaches, looking at not just ecological aspects, but also socio-economic aspects to understand feasible conservation solutions. So if we can do this across different species, across different habitats and different parts of India, we can develop conservation and management plans that are more practical, more inclusive, and might actually be effective in achieving their objectives. So that's it for my talk. Thank you so much again for having me here and giving me the chance to talk about my research. I'd like to quickly acknowledge my funders for this study as well as for my current PhD. And of course, acknowledge the fishing community of Mahadevan because without them, the study would not have been possible. I'm happy to talk about this work or any other work anytime. So you can just feel free to email me or reach out to me. I've provided my contact details here. And yes, thank you.
Thank you so much, Trisha, for this wonderful presentation. And it was quite interesting. And we will have this Q&A session, and we'll have more opportunities to have in-depth discussions with you. So our next presenter is Dr. Mahadevan. Dr. Mahadevan is doctorate in marine biology and oceanography and has 10 years of research experience, and he is currently working as a project manager at Nature Environment and Wildlife Society, and he is working on sea turtle conservation. So over to you, Dr. Mahadevan. Welcome to the session.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you to the W4W Foundation for giving me the opportunity to present my work, and also to my organization, Nature and Wildlife Society, for giving me a platform to present the work which we are doing in our field station, Karikal. So I would like to start my topic. My topic is conservation of sea turtle. Sorry. Turtles are reptiles of the order Testudines family. They have cartilaginous cells developed from the ribs, and five species of sea turtles are found to inhabit in Indian coastal water. Actually, for knowing the turtles, we should know what is the difference between sea turtle, tortoise, and terrapin. Sea turtles are exclusively lives in seawater, and their males never come to the shore. Only females come to the shoreline for laying eggs. And tortoise are generally land dwellers. They cannot swim in any sort of water, even freshwater or seawater. Terrapins are freshwater species which have webs in their hand, and it lives mostly in the freshwater. And now we are going to deal with only sea turtles only. Globally, there are 7 species of sea turtles, and most of them are critically endangered or vulnerable. In India, only 5 species of sea turtles are only available, which are olive ridley, loggerhead, leatherback, hawksbill, and green turtle. The flatback turtle and Kemp's ridley turtles is not available in our coastal water. And the bycatch and poaching is the biggest threat to this group of animals. Turtles have their own importance in mythological also. The Chinese consider that the world evolved from the turtle cells. In Greek, they believe that it represents wisdom, and India, it is considered as reincarnation of Lord Vishnu. Turtles lay egg. Reproduction of the turtles. Turtles lay egg in nest. Turtles lay. They came to nest on their natal beaches. Natal beaches means where they were born. They were from where they were born, or they were hatched out. And most of the turtles make fake nests to deceive their predators. And their incubation period of the eggs is normally about 40 to 60 days. It depends upon the temperature of the sand. If the turtle egg is laid in a sand with the temperature of 28 to 30 degrees centigrade, so there will be most probability of getting female turtles. And if it is laid in lesser temperature sand, then it is lesser temperature than about 26 to 28, the males will be male turtles. There is most probability of male turtles. Higher the temperature, more female. That is what is the concept in turtle incubation. Then this is a video which I will show you a little bit, not more. This is the video which we have recorded in Karaikal, where a sea turtle was laying its egg in the coastal belt. Then hatchlings, once out in the sea, will swim for 20 to 40 years, 24 to 40 years, so continuously into the deeper sea for protection, food, to their foraging grounds. Marine mating take place in turtle mating take place in shallow water near to nesting beaches. Since the process and journey of egg laying is tedious, many female prefer to come with a gap of 2 to 3 years. It is not that every year the same turtle will come. If it comes once in 2 or 3 years also, it will come. The mating season for turtle is October to November, and nesting and egg laying season is December to January. Till late February also it goes, and egg incubation lasts till February to April. And this is our study area, Karaikal, which is part of Pondicherry Union Territory. Its coastline is about 17 kilometers in length, and it has 10 fishing villages from Vadakamanjur to Mandaptur, where we are trying to conserve turtles for our study. Great turtles are also available in Indian coast, but not that much in number. And in this you can see green turtle, juvenile, adult, male, female. And the main difference between adult and female is that adult will have larger this tail length, and the female will have lesser length of this tail. The adult size is 4 to 4.5 feet, and it weighs about 170 to 190 kilogram, and it is endangered. Most common, it is considered as one of the most common species sea turtle. It is called green turtle because of their green color of fat under the shell. Green turtles can be recognized. Green turtles. Great turtles can be recognized. Identification. It has one pair of scales in front of their eye and 2 prefrontal scales. It is the most simplest way of identifying green turtle. Then it is flatback turtle. They are flatback turtles. They are named because of their flat back. Now other turtles have curvy. Their carapace will be curvy in nature, but in this turtle it will be flat. They can reach up to 100 centimeters in length and 100 kilogram of weight. Flatback sea turtles are very common in Australia. They are not found in Indian coast. Loggerhead turtle can grow up to size 31.42 inches, and their weight is about 200 kilogram. They can be identified by the large reddish brown carapace and dull brown plastron. It got its name by the loggerhead, means log-like head. That is why it is called loggerhead turtle. Hawksbill turtle cells are very beautiful, and they are mostly poached for that only. And these are one of the second smallest species of the turtle. The identification features of these turtles are the overlapping scutes, hawks-like bill, 4 pair of prefrontal scales. Its size is about 2.5 to 3 feet. It weighs about 40 to 70 kilogram. It is mostly poached for their beautiful carapace. Then it is leatherback. This species is very common in Andaman, but in the main east and west coast of India, you cannot find this species. It can the leatherbacks, deepest divers and longest traveler. They are the deepest diver and longest traveler, and largest recorded is 916 kilogram with 7 feet length. And the next one is olive ridley, which is very common in our coastal waters. We in our coastal area receive a lot of olive ridley turtles only. These are the images of juvenile adult male and adult female olive ridley, which sizes about 2 to 2.5 feet and its weight is about 40 to 50 kg. It's vulnerable. It is recorded. This is one of the smallest sea turtle. It's one of the smallest sea turtle after Kemp's, but bigger than Kemp's red-legged turtle. It is also one of the most numerous species of it is the most numerous species of turtle. It is named ordinarily because of its olive coloring. Now, why turtles are important? Turtles carry barnacles, algae, and other similar organisms known as amphibians. They provide a food source for fish and shrimp. Olive ridley species are most frequently associated with seabed, providing platform for seabirds to perch. Sea turtles are an integral part of the interspecies interaction in marine ecosystem as prey consumer, competitor, and host. They regulate a variety of other organisms like jellyfishes, it controls the population of jellyfishes, which can harm the population of fishes. If jellyfish population gets more, then the fish population will get decreased because it eats on its eggs and juveniles. So that way, turtle helps us to control jellyfishes. Now, threats to turtles. Most hatchling, only the 1% of the hatchling, 1% of the egg only survives in the sea. And the major threats to the turtles are human settlement and industrial development, shrimp and other aquaculture development, sand mining for exploitation of mineral wealth, and entanglement in fishing net and trawlers. These are a few examples of turtles. These are the few turtles which we found in bad condition in our coastal waters. This one is propeller hit on the head of the turtle. This one you can see it is a mature turtle which came for a laying egg, but it got hurt by the propeller and the unfertilized eggs you can see it is lying on the sands. This turtle got drowned in the on the trawlers and it died. This one got trapped in the ghost net and it was not able to survive. These are few examples of this thing, and these are some videos where our news team has tried to rescue turtles which were entangled in the fishing nets. We asked fishermen to rescue those things, and I can show you few videos. In this video, you can see the fishermen are throwing back the turtles which was caught in the net. And here you can see one turtle which got drawn in it got entangled in the net and drawn, and they have not turned it back, and that is why it died. And this is another video where the fishermen released one juvenile green turtle. One olive ridley and one matured adult olive ridley was rescued by our team. Conservation. What is making sea turtles endangered? Conservation of turtle is dependent on these three questions. What is making the sea turtles endangered? How can we protect turtle? What a common person like we can do for conservation of sea turtle? What is causing the sea turtle endangered? Destroying the coastal developmental activities like destroying nesting beaches, increasing pollution, especially plastics, distracting light pollution, distracting hatchling with light, beach vehicle activity also causes problem to the turtles. In this photo, you can see one hatchling was ran over by a vehicle when it was trying to go back to the sea. Net and major threats. What is the making sea turtle? The major threat to the sea turtles are shrimp trawlers and nets, fishing activities. When the turtles got entangled in the nets or shrimp trawlers, it generally gets drowned and it dies. And few of the turtles are also used for their beautiful carapace and for meat also. And humans are also causing various anthropogenic activities which destroys their habitat, their nesting ground, and their breeding ground. These are few examples of turtles where we have found in the fishing. These are fishing harbors. In the fishing harbors, we have recorded a lot of turtles getting entangled in the trawlers, and they were brought dead from the sea. And this ghost net is also a serious threat. Serious threat to the turtles. These ghost nets are nothing, just abandoned net which is thrown in the seashore or sea water, and it gets offshore in the sea on the beaches. And when the turtle hatchlings tries to go back to the sea, it gets entangled, and it becomes more prone to the predators. This also causes huge loss of sea turtles. Various industrial developmental activities like sand walls also creates problem to the sea turtles. Oil spills and damage to coral reefs and seagrass beds, which is a foraging ground of the sea turtles, also causes problem to sea turtles. In this image, you can see various turtle-based products which are found in the market, like eggs of sea turtle, meat, barbecue, various art effects like fans, palm, bracelet, then musical instruments like guitars made up of what was I was telling, hawksbill turtles, and hawksbill turtles carapace is being also sold in the market for their good economic value. And it is being natural mortality of the turtle is because of the various animals like monitor lizard, dogs, stray dogs, then crabs. This also eats their eggs and hatchlings, newly hatched hatchlings. This also causes problem to the turtles. For how can we protect the turtles and their habitat? The best method to protect them is by asking the fishermen to use TED, turtle exclusion device. It is nothing, just a metal frame which is attached with the trawlers for the safe passage of turtles. When it gets entangled in the trawlers, it has a option to it can escape from the trawlers by the TED, which gives it a safe passage to go back to the sea, decreasing pollution and getting involved in the turtle conservation. These are the few measures which we can. This is what I was telling. This is TED. It is just nothing like a metal frame which is attached with the trawler, and through that these turtles can escape from the turtle net, and it can go back to the sea. But the main problem is that the fishermen of our area, they are not using it, because they believe that if they use it, they can lose some amount of their fish catch also. So that is why it is not being promoted by the fishermen. And also education and awareness. Education is awareness is the best way of helping the turtles to restore. The trade of turtle products should be banned. Scientific research should be more focused on the turtle thing. Awareness among local population is the need of the hour. Decreasing pollution and trash is the decrease has to be taken. Plastic straws and other packets should be decreased, because most of the time plastics, this turtle starts eating plastic as jellyfish, and it causes problem to them. That's right. And in this photo we can see that this is a beach cleaning activity which was done by us in the Karaikal coastal waters. We were trying to remove the ghost net fishing and debris, fishing waste and debris from our area. And similarly, soda cans, soda bottles, water bottles can be recycled from what we are getting from the beach. And marine animal products made up of turtle, especially turtles, should be banned. And before eating, we should know what we are eating, and whether it is produced from whether it is good from the conservation aspect, that we should have to think before eating something. Yes, this is do you like to see a turtle like this? This turtle was entangled in a turtle net, and before the fishermen have released it before reaching to the harbor, and it get offshore. And this was recorded by us in our field station, Karaikal. And these are two videos where our team rescued few hatchlings to go back to the sea. And in this video also you can see that our team, by providing the light source, we help the turtle to go back to the sea, because turtles need light, especially they follow moonlight, but sometimes when it is not there, we have to help it to go by providing the artificial light. and a small step from us can help them for their survival. And this, you can see, the turtle which got entangled in the net was rescued by our team to go back to the.
Yeah.
This is my lady. If any doubt, anything you can ask to me. And now I would like to hear your questions from you.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Dr. Mahadevan, for this interesting presentation. And now we have our young discussant, Nitya. Nitya is doing her master's in wildlife studies. And an interesting thing about Nitya is like she was also part of this Wildlife Institute of India's Campa Dugon camp. I think Nitya would be able to share her experience with you. So Nitya, yeah. Hello. Yeah, Nitya, welcome to you.
Good evening. Good evening,
So,
everyone.
Nitya, you can quickly talk about your experience about this Dugon camp, and then you can ask few questions. And I would also request you to pick up some questions from the chat, and we will then request audience to ask these questions.
Sure,
Just
ma'am.
a second, Nitya. Just give me a moment. Dr. Mahadevan, would you please close your presentation? Thank you.
I will. You want me to share my video?
Over to you, Nitya. Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. So I did my master's in wildlife studies. I've always been fascinated with marine mammals. So I got an opportunity to volunteer in WII Campa Dugon for a short-term volunteer in Gujarat, Okha. So dugong sightings are very rare. So this was the first practical experience I could do due to the COVID situation. So this was a very memorable experience. I could get good mentors. I found a good roommate and many people there. So basically, I could share I could hear many stories about marine mammals and how they are being caught by the fishermen and how they are released by the fishermen only. And I could see with a personal experience, I went for the practical like for the collecting the samples. I went to the Paga Island where we had to collect some invertebrate samples. So that was the first experience, and I absolutely loved it. So I understood that this is the stream what I want to do, and I want to experience more, learn more, and be included in all the subjects which I really love.
Yeah. Dr. Mahadevan, could you please switch on your camera? Yeah, thank you so much. So, Nitya, could you please ask your questions, and then we will request audience to.
Yeah. So, yeah, thank you, sir and ma'am, for a wonderful presentation. So first, Trisha, ma'am. So I read an article about your article in Mongbay, where you mentioned about a draft of NPOA, which was submitted in 2015. So are there any developments in the draft currently?
Thanks for the question, Nitya. So just for everyone, if anyone doesn't know, the NPOA is the National Plan of Action for Sharks and Rays, which is something that many coastal countries are committed to drafting, and it's basically a plan to help manage and conserve these species in each country. So as you said, a draft had been submitted to the government to implement in 2015, and unfortunately it has not been passed or implemented since then, and there hasn't been any progress in that front. I have heard that last year that the ministry is looking at the plan again and is interested in trying to get it passed and get it implemented, but it has not happened so far. So hopefully it will happen in the near future.
So next question, ma'am. According to the government, there are numerous funding projects related to the blue revolution. So does the conservation of sharks and rays fall under these funding projects?
Yeah, so that is also a really good question. And at the moment, sadly, they're almost at two different ends when it comes to the blue revolution schemes that the government is currently promoting. A lot of that involve expansion of fisheries and increase economic growth and development of the marine sector. So yeah, largely through expanding our fisheries, going into deep sea fishing, and the schemes often involve things like subsidies for example, long line fishing and for other things to increase marine production. And that doesn't really align with marine conservation at the same time. So it doesn't really spell hope for sharks and rays. And that's not to say that development and conservation cannot go hand in hand. But the current way that a lot of these blue economy schemes are currently going is not really supporting actual sustainable use or conservation of marine species. So there needs to be a way to align these development objectives with marine conservation and conservation of these highly threatened species.
So ma'am, do sharks and ray require a conservation reserve similar which is in Dugon Reserve, which is in Park Bay, Tamil Nadu? Is this a way which we can protect the sharks and rays?
Yeah, so they do have, there are things like this in many countries in the world. They're called shark sanctuaries. So they're essentially a form of marine protected area that has been designed specifically for shark and shark conservation. And of course, conservation of other marine species that are also found in this region. We don't have anything like that in India so far. And I think it might be challenging to implement just because again, there's so much fishing activities and so many small scale fisheries that depend on using these waters. So blocking out any part of the ocean, especially specifically for sharks, might just not be feasible. So I think when it comes to protected areas, especially in Indian waters, we need to consider a lot more species and other marine diversity as well to see how we can maximize its effectiveness across different species. And it has to be done in conversation with the local community, because a lot of the shark sanctuaries in many other parts of the world have been implemented in regions that are more isolated, where there's not much of human activity happening or not much of damage to livelihoods. So that's why they could implement it, but it would be challenging in India.
Trisha, I have one question here. I would like to understand that how effective these marine protected area and marine national parks are in protecting like these ecologically sensitive species. And do you see any kind of conflict between local communities and then these regulatory authorities in these protected areas?
Yeah, that's a good question, quite a difficult question to answer, because things like protected areas are definitely quite contentious and can be quite controversial topics, because even among scientists and researchers, I think you have evidence for both sides. There is evidence to show how marine protected areas can be effective and have, in many cases, achieved their objectives and increased marine biodiversity and helped threatened species to recover. But there's also evidence from other regions to show that they have not, and they haven't really made any kind of impact. And so I think it's a bit difficult and something that needs to be considered place to place. When it comes to conflict, then yeah, most definitely there is a lot of conflict in most regions in the world, especially if you look at the global south, if you look at developing countries. There tends to, because a lot of marine protected areas are created without including the local community, and there usually is some amount of conflict. So to give you an example, where I worked in Malvan, there is a Malvan Marine Sanctuary. So there is an area right around the bay that has been notified as a protected area, but it has not actually, like, it's a paper park at the moment. It hasn't actually been implemented or designated so far. And that's because there was a lot of pushback from the community the first time this was proposed. So the community protested and said that if you make this a protected area, how are we small fishers supposed to fish and survive? So they push back to the government, and then right now it's just in a sort of limbo. It hasn't moved forward, so it's not been designated or implemented yet because of all of this conflict, and it's something that fishers don't really like, or yeah, it's a bit complicated.
Thank you. Yeah, Nitya, you have questions for Dr. Mahadevan?
Uh, I'll ask question to Trisha ma'am. What are the
Maybe a
what
quick question. Yeah, because
yes,
our audiences are also waiting.
what are the challenges you have faced as a woman in this industry?
Yeah, that's an interesting one.
Yeah, it's not always easy, of course, because it is a bit of a male-dominated space, and then working again on ground in small rural areas in India is not always easy or the safest for a female researcher. Then working with fishing communities that again tend to be very patriarchal. But of course, you know what the challenges are, broadly speaking. I think I can say specifically when it comes to working with fishing communities, I did have some issues sometimes where, for example, I wanted to go on top of the fishing vessel and accompany fishermen on their trips to collect data on board, which would be a lot more richer than any data that you can collect from the shore. But fishermen were not comfortable having a woman accompany them for multiple reasons. So despite trying multiple times, trying to build relationships with a few trawl fishermen and gillnet fishers and getting them comfortable enough for me to come on board, it just didn't happen. And I had to change a lot of my studies because of that. So from a more practical or research standpoint, that was definitely quite challenging. And there, of course, the usual safety issues while working in male-dominated spaces. So I always try not to work alone and have colleagues around me or research assistants, even if there are other women. It is a bit safer to work in a team. And I was lucky to have supportive colleagues all throughout that helped me deal with any issues that I might have faced. So far, most of the communities that I've worked with have been very friendly, even if, say, there are one or two fishers who are not as friendly, the rest of them will make up for it. And I can say one advantage of being a woman and working in field is that people also tend to trust you sometimes a bit more than they would if you were a man. They tend to also open up to you. Fisher women would also trust you a lot more, so it's a lot easier working with the women from local communities. So there are some advantages as well.
Thank you,
So,
ma'am.
Trisha, you are being a role model for all other women and girls to opt for this kind of study in an open ecosystem, because generally it's not very acceptable kind of areas like in the society.
Thank you. I hope so. I hope that women are not scared about working in these spaces, because it's definitely worth it once you get out there.
Thank you, ma'am. Hello, sir. Thank you for your presentation. So I have a question. If the temperature is used to determine the gender of the hatchling, how can we combat this problem in the world where the weather is becoming an extreme because of the climate change?
Climate change, yes, really, the climate change has its own impact on the weather. If the climate change, if it is getting hotter, definitely females will be more, males will be less. But mostly turtles are having its own adaptation to whatever it needs. It mostly, but from my personally observation, I am telling you that the turtles can predetermine what it needs. In our area, what I have seen is that in the open sandy beaches, it lays some eggs, and it lays some eggs in the casuarina forest in the coastal area, so that it will lay some egg it will lay some eggs for females, and it will lay some eggs for turtles. So climate change definitely will have impact, but turtles are also adapted for what it needs. It can adapt it. It is not that climate change will totally vanish the turtle population.
Do microplastics have an effect on the hatchlings?
Microplastic, you cannot say. Basically, the ghost nets. Turtles will not eat. The hatchlings will not eat in the coastal area. So in the beaches. So basically, the ghost nets where its flipper gets entangled. So that is what is causing more danger to the turtle. So that when it gets entangled, the predators like birds and dogs will have easy access to have it.
Which conservation policies would you like to be implemented for the turtle conservation?
conservation policy. Sorry, I cannot. I didn't get it. Which conservation policy means? What you want to?
Any policies you would like to change, sir, rather than the current policies, which could help us in the conservation of the turtles?
Conservation of turtle, I would like to say that, madam, what from my observation, I am telling you that if the forest department and the fisheries department and even the local fishermen, if they work together, there will not be any problem to the sea turtles. Basically, what we have found that the fisheries department and forest department, they are not cooperating each other in our area. I'm telling you from my perspective. I don't know about other places. Here, they don't have enough staff to monitor what kind of gears the fishermen are using. Similarly, forest departments are also not monitoring what is coming in the beaches. If they are able to regulate and check periodically what is going on, then definitely accordingly policies can be made to protect it. But nowadays, there is no proper cooperation between them, and they are not at all conservative. They are not thinking in conservative point of view.
I think
What are the
holistic ecosystem based or habitat based policies required, because right now it's like they work in silos and there's no integration or coordination between these different stakeholders, like which are either state departments or communities. So I think this kind of integration is required, as he's suggesting.
Yeah, definitely there should be an integrated this effort should be there, so in order to protect it. Everybody should be part of it. Those who are going to those who are visiting the beaches, they should also participate. They should not throw their garbages in the beaches. Similarly, the other stakeholders, the government stakeholders and other NGOs like us, they should be also equally should take responsibility, their own responsibility for conserving turtles.
Nitya, do you have any more questions? Otherwise, we can request audience to ask questions. Maybe we can invite a few of them.
Yes, ma'am. That would be better.
Yeah. So I think we have Gautami. She has many questions. So Gautami, could you please switch on your camera and then request you to ask your question?
I'm not in a position to.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, please go ahead with your question.
To Ms. Trisha, I have two questions. One would be, how much will it actually have an impact on the shark population of sharks and rays if we actually pass the rule and implement it for the protection of sharks and rays? Or how will it even affect the fishermen? The government rule.
Are you talking about a specific government rule, or you mean like a ban on shark and ray fishing?
I don't think a ban. Okay, I'm generalizing the question. What kind of rule which will help the regulation of shark fisheries?
Okay, again, I think it's a good question, definitely a complicated one. I think from my perspective, the kind of rules or policies we need is not necessarily to ban them or to even think about them too much from, or let me phrase it in a different way. I think what we need is better fisheries regulation. So instead of trying to say protect these species, don't catch these species, that's very difficult to do, especially given that they're caught as bycatch. So instead, we really need to have better fisheries policies to begin with that regulate the kind of fishing pressure that we're allowing in our waters, the kind of gear that people are using, and also better implement the current policies that we do have, because even though there are some good regulations in place, they're not always implemented, and a lot of the bigger fishing vessels and even the smaller fishing vessels tend to break them. So even having stronger regulations on the kind of gear people are using can reduce the number of not just sharks and rays, but even juvenile fish or other threatened species such as turtles as well. and can probably be a lot more effective for their conservation than just implementing strict bans or things like that.
Okay, yeah, yes, right. So I think a law that will help the population as well as the fishermen should be passed and implemented. Thank you for that. And my second question would be, if now I really want to work with sharks and rays, and since a long time, and if I were to like have research on them, then what coast, like East Coast or West Coast, like what coast has much abundance to do the research, or what domain should I select so that that will actually help the shark conservation?
So it's a good question, and I've one of my PhD papers actually looked at this to see where the gaps are when it comes to shark and ray research in the country, and I can just share that paper in the chat in a minute. But to quickly answer your question, the East Coast is generally poorly studied, especially states like Andhra Pradesh, Orissa, and West Bengal when it comes to elasmobranchs. And I always strongly advocate to young researchers to look into socioeconomic factors. So while there is definitely a data gap, even in terms of their biology and ecology, there is still a bit more focus on that. But we know very little about how they're actually being used, how they're actually being caught by fishermen, where are they being traded to? Because those are the kind of questions that will also help us develop conservation plans and to see whether we need measures even further down the supply chain if restrictions and regulations on their trade, on their export might actually help the problem rather than just constantly targeting fishers and fishing communities. So that's something that I can definitely promote. But in general, if you want to work on the subject and if you're a young researcher, just take any opportunity that comes your way. And you can always build up your own project in a few years once you have a bit more experience and knowledge on how to do this.
Okay, thank you so much. That was really, really helpful, and your talk was wonderful. I also have a question for.
Yeah, so I think Trisha has shared her email ID. So I think for further discussion, maybe you can get in touch with her because we have this time constraint. And we have now Ajit and Abhishek. They have also posted their questions in the chat box. So Ajit, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, good evening. Good evening to both young speakers, Trisha and Mahadevan. You have done really well. This is really a very dynamic subject. I think a lot of youth should be able to take up this mammal research and sea mammals research. It is because that India has got a vast coastline. It's very, very important. Okay, my question is on the factory ships. We hear that Indian Ocean, there are many factory ships trying to do massive fishing. What is being done to curb these type of exploitation of marine resources? This question is for Trisha, please.
Thank you for the question. So do you mean factory ships that are from other countries that are coming towards Indian waters and fishing at a very large scale?
Yes, yes, mainly Chinese ships. They literally have those ships. Raw fish they take out from the sea and produce is done and containerized and packed off in container ships and gone as export. So the ocean is getting drained of lot of this sea mammals,
Yeah, so this is a good question, and it's definitely a major problem, not just around Indian waters, but of course across the globe, where you have this sort of very large scale factory fishing vessels and trawlers and things like that, and it's something that is generally referred to as IUU fishing, or illegal, unregulated, and unreported fishing. So it's definitely difficult for only the Indian government to deal with this because it is an international issue. And it's not something that I'm too familiar with, but from what I know, it's something that a lot of international agreements and countries are coming together to try and tackle this better. So even from, for example, the Interpol, the International Police, are devising ways to better police this and to catch the
Thank you.
fishing
Thank you.
vessels that
Thank
are
you very
doing these
much.
operations.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the insight. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so I hope this helps. And there is a bit of work that's been done on a global scale. So it's definitely something that needs like multilateral effort and governments coming together to tackle it. Yeah.
So I think we can take one question from Aryan.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Ajit.
Yes, good evening, ma'am. Ma'am, I had a question that can sharks be protected by artificially inseminating them like they do in humans? And are there any organizations that do such things?
Yes, that's an interesting question. There isn't anything that's been done in practice right now anywhere in the world, but there is some experimental research that is looking at things like this, artificial insemination and captive breeding, and even things like freezing reproductive gametes and things like that for elasmobranchs for long-term conservation of these highly threatened species. So right now it's just a few trials and experimental research, as I said, that I think I've read about being done in Europe. And I guess based on the results of these things and how viable they turn out to be, maybe we can look at implementing some of these for some of the highly threatened species. But I think it might be challenging just given the kind of reproductive biology elasmobranchs have. It's not the same as bony fish where artificial breeding and things like insemination and captive breeding is a lot easier. So I suspect that it might be quite challenging to for this to be a feasible option.
And ma'am, one more question.
Sure.
Like they culture prawns, can they also culture sharks so that people can get what they need from sharks and protect the endangered species so that they can get both the things at the same time?
Yeah, another really interesting question. Again, as far as I know, I don't think there's any kind of culture happening for elasmobranchs, at least not in India, and I haven't heard of it happening in other countries, so it might be the case that it is. But I think that it's something that is an interesting prospect, but again comes back to what I said earlier about their biology and the way that they breed and things like that. Captive rearing and breeding is not very easy for elasmobranchs. A lot of them are viviparous, which means they're live birthing. So they don't lay eggs. They in fact give birth to live young, similar to mammals. So because of this itself, it doesn't really work the same way as other fish. But it might be possible for some of the smaller species. But I also think from a more practical standpoint, if any kind of aquaculture like this was to be implemented for sharks and rays, it would, as you said, yes, provide this sort of food source and replace fishing for sharks and rays. But in the end of the day, the fishermen themselves who are currently catching them are not going to be the ones who will be involved in culturing or rearing them in this other options. So they will still lose out. So I think that's also something to be considered.
Thank you, ma'am. I really enjoyed your lecture. I also had
Thank
a
you.
question for Mahadevan, sir. Sir, the leatherback turtles are soft shell, right?
No, nothing like that. It's
Sir,
leathery. It has
sir,
five.
so they have a softer shell than the other turtles, right?
Yeah.
So can it be pierced by sharks and other predators? Can it be attacked?
It has leathery shell, and it is very hard. And I have not seen any reports where it is being attacked by sharks or rays. Maybe I will have to check. You can ask Trisha if she can answer it. Sharks eating.
Yeah, I actually haven't heard of anything of sharks eating leatherback turtles per se, but sharks do predate on other turtles, definitely, like green turtles, olive ridleys are consumed by sharks. So leatherbacks are quite large, but it could be possible that they are consumed as well.
Yeah, so
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Aryan. I would like to express my thanks once again to all the panelists for this enriching session. And I also would like to extend my gratitude to all the audience who took out time from their busy schedule to grace the event. And I would like to announce that or inform you that we have these sessions under the Water and Biodiversity series every second Wednesday of the month. So please stay tuned with us because in every session we will take you to a new aquatic ecosystem and some amazing species. So I look forward to having you all again in the next session, which will be next month. I think Mansi will announce the date. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, first of all, Jayati, for this wonderful session. You are bringing us closer to other creatures of this planet, and that was the whole purpose when we discussed why we should have a biodiversity series. And thank you so much for to Trisha Gupta and Dr. Mahadevan Gopal, because all these sessions are really becoming closer to my heart, really understand that it is not only about human beings when we are talking about water. And one of the best discussants we have had so far, Nitya, so I'm talking to you outside this session as well. So keep up these inquiries, because it's extremely important that youth are always full of questions, that's really, really important. Before I do the closure of the session, on behalf of W4W Foundation, I would like to thank all the participants here for making these sessions more meaningful, and your support and encouragement is extremely crucial for us to continue and reach towards the 200 sessions, which we are aiming for by July. So just to introduce, the next session of Wednesdays for Water is also a series. So next third Wednesday of every month, we are having Riverscape series, and next week, which is 19th of April at 5 p.m. again, we are going to talk about climate change and culture with respect to rivers in the country. And the week, we have Friday Waters also next week. And then that time we are talking about, which is a thesis club this next Friday. And that we are talking about issues of equity and precarity in the canal irrigation system. And the case is of Vishwasharya Canal Network. And in Friday Waters Thesis Club, we are inviting PhD scholars. So if there are other people who know any PhD scholars who are doing good work, do let us know. If you know any authors who would like to present their book reading, we do Friday book reading as well. If you know filmmakers, please let us know. We do water talkies also on Fridays. So these are only once in a month session, just like Biodiversity series. So we are really grateful to have you all. You have all the information at the chat box, as you can see, that the information on next week's Friday Waters and Wednesdays for Water session is there. Next Biodiversity series is going to be in May, as rightly mentioned by Jayati, that it is usually the second week or second Wednesday of every month when we are having, and that's 10th of May. And we look forward to having you with more creatures and really saying them a short hello through this online conversation. Do take care of yourself, and please come back again to meet other creatures of this planet who co-inhabit with us. And thank you, all of you, from the bottom of my heart, from Wednesdays for Water. Thank you.